G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below to keep updated. But today's video is going to be all about the ultimate guide to diesel heaters for your caravan or your motorhome. So today we're going to look at absolutely everything in relation to heating your van, what options we have, why I chose a diesel heater specifically, and we're going to go into detail about how this unit works, how hard it is to install, the power usage that it draws, the maintenance required. Quite commonly asked is how much noise do they make and are they disruptive to a campsite. So we're going to do a bit of a test in relation to the noise that it's emitted, how safe are they to use around your kids, and all the frequently asked questions. So stay tuned, let's get straight into today's video. Okay guys, so I'm going to do a quick disclaimer before I start this video. I just want to be clear that I'm not sponsored by any company and I'm not here to push any makes, models or types of heaters to the viewers here, okay? I chose a diesel heater specifically for my van because it works for me. There are other really good options out there and you're just going to make that informed decision about what works for you. Obviously the biggest competitor to the diesel heater is a gas heater, and I know those who have gas are just going to say that gas is the best, and that probably is the best for their application. But in this video we're going to go over all the pros and cons for the different types of heating and why I chose diesel heaters specifically, and then we're going to go into how they work, how to install them, and all the other good things about them. So stay tuned, let's go. Now this video is going to be fairly long because we're going to go into a lot of detail about all aspects of heating and the diesel heater specifically. So if there's a particular subject that you want to know about, whether or not be the noise that's emitted, we're going to do a test on how quickly it heats this van up today, which is a 17-foot pop top. If you want to see these specific subjects, look in the description below. There'll be a timestamp for each of the topics there. You can click directly onto them and it'll take you to that point in the video. But if you are looking at different options for your van, or specifically diesel heaters, I recommend you watch the whole video and then you get a really good idea about how these units work and whether or not they're going to be right for your application. Okay guys, so the first thing we're going to get into today is what options do we have as caravan owners or the owners of a motorhome for heating our vans. So in Australia we're coming into winter now, and the best part about it is that even though all the global events have recently happened, we're starting to be able to get out and go camping again. So for heating there are many different options. So starting from the first one is normally the heating option you get from factory with your van. So in this particular 17.58-3 Jayco Journey that we own here, we get the rooftop mounted Truma Adventure unit. Now this unit is a reverse cycle air conditioning and heater, and you might say, well, why, if it's a heater, why would you be looking at other options? So there's two reasons we look at other options apart from that roof mounted unit. The first one is the fact that that unit up there needs 240 volt to operate. So unless we're plugged into a caravan park or pulled up at someone's house, you're going to need to be plugged into mains power for that to operate, and we do a lot of off-grid camping and it's just not going to work. Not if you want to be running a generator all night. The second reason is that these units are generally designed more for the cooling here in Australia and not so much for heating. So when the ambient temperature outside gets around the 4 to 5 degree mark, these units stop heating effectively, and in essence they'll be just running and running, and that won't actually be heating your van. So a kind of a no-go unless you're going to be constantly camping at caravan parks. The second option you have, again, is for 240 volts. So by far the cheapest way to heat up your van is just by buying a general home heater from a store like Kmart or Target. So in our van, we do carry this little heater here. They're only about anywhere between $20 and $50. They plug directly into your 240 volt GPO within your van, and they do a really great job at heating your van up. Now, the only negative with these units is, again, that it needs that 240 volt power input, and they are quite power hungry. So when you're off grid, again, unless you're going to be running a generator all day, then you're not going to be using that. Now there are three main other options that we can look at for heating, specifically when we're off-grid camping. So the first one we can look at is diesel heating, and that's the one we're going to go into detail today. We're going to go over exactly how that works, what sort of power draw, how easy it is to install, all the pros and cons for it. Let's go into that a bit later on in the video, but they are a very cost-effective way to heat your van. The second option, again another very popular option here in Australia, is gas heating. So this is essentially using a very similar system to the diesel heater in the way in which it works, but it's using the gas LPG bottles that you have on your van as fuel instead of using a separate diesel fuel source. So the third option is a combination unit. Now these units sort of pair up with the hot water system in the van, and they're more of an instant system. They're very quick, they're very efficient, they do run on LPG, and they take away the need for a hot water system tank, and they do heat up your van really effectively. So the reason I'm not going to go into too much detail about these units is that they are not so popular because they do require a fair bit of work to retrofit them to your van from factory, unless you have them built from factory with that unit installed. They are also quite expensive, and they do require specialist services to install them. So yes, they are a great option, but they are quite expensive. The unit alone comes in just under $3,000, so it is a fair investment there, and then you've also got to pay for it to be fitted as well. So we won't go much into that. We're going to focus today on the pros and cons of gas and diesel. Why did I choose a diesel heater for our van? So there's a few main reasons. First one, cost. They are relatively low cost, especially if you're going to be buying one of the Chinese ones. Now I didn't buy one of the Chinese ones. I built one called an Erbisbacher. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but it's a German brand. It's the Airtronic D2, so it's a 2 kilowatt system. Now, even though it is that more expensive brand model, I had to buy the individual tank, and I bought a few accessories like an intake filter, an extra muffler, some exhaust pipe, and things like that to go with it. In total, I was looking at about $1,400 to $1,500 for all the parts that I needed, and they're all name brand parts with warranty, good service, and availability for parts quite easily online. So like I mentioned in a few of my other videos, I do buy a lot of the products I use online. So I actually bought this entire system, all the parts to go with it, all off eBay. I found that buying the heater itself from a UK seller was a little bit cheaper. And what I'll do is I'll stick a link to all the parts that I bought from the sellers I bought them from in the description below. And then if you wanted to, you can go ahead and buy them for yourself. I'll also stick a link down there to a couple of Chinese ones. Not that I have personal experience with their reliability, but you can compare the specs there and see sort of the build quality and what they claim. Now, another big reason I chose to get the diesel heater is I could fit it myself. So it's not a very hard install. I'm going to go over a little bit later exactly how I installed it, but you can fit them yourself. You can plumb them up, fuel them up, and you can set up all the electrics yourself. Quite basic, nice and easy to do. I did it in my front yard. It took me maybe half a day or so, but it's not a hard task by any means. These diesel heaters are also extremely efficient in the way that they use fuel. So on this van, we only have a 10-litre external diesel tank, and that will give us up to 50 hours of runtime on the heater on its highest setting. So keep in mind, we don't normally run this overnight. We normally run it for a few hours in the evening and maybe a couple of hours in the morning. So therefore, you're going to get a long time. I only have to fill this thing up once or twice a year, and even then, at the end of the or during the summer, I do drain the tank and put some fresh stuff in. Given the fact that we're using this off-grid, another big consideration you have to take into effect is they are a nice low power draw. If we're not plugged into power, then we're using a diesel heater. That means that we're going to have to make sure it's going to be something that can run in the background without flattening our van batteries. Now, we're only running a single deep cycle battery, just as you would get from Jayco's factory, and this heater can be run all night. And it only draws about 2.5 amps on the high setting with the fan on once that it has warmed up and it's in its normal operating temperature. Now, for me, using a diesel heater is not too inconvenient. My tow vehicle is also a diesel, and so when I go to fill up that, if I need fuel, either stick about 10 litres into a jerry can, or I'll just pull the car forward and I can fill it up straight from the Bowser. If I were to have a gas heater and be using it LPG, again, like I said, we only get about 2 to 3 weeks off grid with the family of 4 using the appliances that we have with a gas bottle, and I'd be running into a town or a nearby area to get that gas bottle filled up. Diesel is much more readily available, especially in regional areas, and for me, it's not a hassle, just putting an extra few litres either in a jerry can or topping it straight up into the Caravan's tank. And I want to talk a little bit about the different types of diesel heaters. Obviously, like I said, they are quite a good value for money, but there are differences between something like the German make that I've got here and your cheap Chinese models. So I have had a little bit of experience with the Chinese ones, and I have fitted them up to another van previously. Now, look, they both work in the same way. They have the same sort of function and they have similar sorts of parts, but like you would expect, you're not going to get the same sort of build quality. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing them, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. They are great value for money. If you're picking up a diesel heater for, say, $200, you really can't beat that value. But keep in mind, you are not going to get the same quality you get out of a name brand like the Airtronic D2. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that without any evidence. With the Chinese heater that we fitted to another van, we fitted it up we went to turn it on and we were constantly getting error codes before we even used it. What we found was that the fan assembly inside the unit itself, which is a round cylinder type device with fins inside, it wasn't quite in a perfect circle shape, which meant that as it was going around, some of the plastic of that fan was touching one of the sides, creating a bit of resistance. The unit was picking up that resistance and shutting off before it even activated the combustion chamber. Now look, it wasn't too hard to fix. A bit of a shave off that fan, it wouldn't hit it anymore, making sure that it was all balanced up. It does work really well, it works efficiently, nothing wrong with it, but I'm saying that's the sort of build quality you're going to expect when you're spending only a couple $100 when you're considering it with something like a $1,500 unit that we've got here. So guys, I want to briefly talk about how I installed this unit. So I didn't video the installation itself because I did it a couple of years ago before I started making these videos. But we can go over how I did it, what was involved, and I can show you a few photos that I took along the way. So let's start with the main unit underneath the bed. So just to give you a bit of perspective, I'm standing in the doorway of the van at the moment. That's towards the rear of the van down there. And our diesel heater is mounted underneath our bed, just under here. So as you can see, the main unit here is bolted to a plate, which you can see underneath that diesel heater there. And that plate was another little extra I bought with the heater. And again, I bought it online and I'll chuck the link in the description, but it is a universal fitting plate. Gives a really good seal around a big hole that you drill in the base of the floor. And make sure that you know, you're not gonna be letting in cold air and dust and whatnot through the holes that you have to drill. So from here, I had to drill one main big hole into the base of the van here. Now this is very important that you measure this up correctly, because you do not want to be drilling that hole in the wrong place. Not only do you have to get the unit to fit on top here like this, but you also have to make sure that you're not going to be going through any gas lines, plumbing lines, or any hardware underneath the van. And most importantly, at the front of the van, like ours is, the chassis rails as well. So it may seem like it's placed right in the middle of the space, maybe not so efficient, but underneath it fits well, and it was a bit limited into where we could fit it in this area. So from here you can also see that this ducting pipe here as well, which is the heat outlet. So you have to drill another decent sized hole in this chipboard here, and then this plastic piece slides in, and then a clamp will hold that ducting to that area there, and obviously you've then got your heat outlet. So on the other side of this unit is an open-ended inlet, which is where the air that's going to be heated up is sucked in through the unit and then out through this heating duct. So you can see here with the electronics here, you got most of that harness wired up, bunched up in the corner of this area here. So this section of our underneath the bed here storage can't be used. You don't really want to be stacking things on top of this heater. But the good thing about buying a quality unit like the Airtronic D2 is that the wiring harness is direct plug and play, making it extremely easy for installation. So that wiring harness then is followed through the back of these cabinets down here, all the way down to the battery underneath that rear bunk. So let's go down there and I'll show you how I've wired it up. So you can see under here with electronics, we're running the J35 unit here, which is this silver box that you can see. So this fan doesn't run fuses as such, it's all inbuilt into the box here. So one thing that the manufacturers do suggest of these diesel heaters when wiring them up is to wire the terminals directly to the battery, which is just here in our van. The reason you want to do that is to make sure that if for whatever reason the power were to be cut, the supply to the heater, you don't want the heater turning off instantly. When you turn the unit off, you will notice that the fan continues for a couple of minutes just to help cool down the unit before it finally turns off. You don't want that unit just going from full blast to nothing in a second. Now one thing with that as well, when we include the J control unit, is that you won't be able to see how many amps are being drawn, and your system won't take into account the time remaining and all that sort of good stuff that the J control system provides in the van. So one way I've come around doing this is I've wired the positive, which is this red wire here, directly to the battery. It comes through a fuse, the fuse block there, so 20 amp and a 5 amp fuse in there, and then that gets wired down through the back of the cabinet here all the way down to the unit. Now, in order to get the amps to be managed through the J35 system, I've wired the negative unit through one of the negative terminals on this J35 system. So it means that at least the negative side of the circuit is going through this system. It's being picked up by the J35, and the J control panel will then show me the amount of amps that it's pulling and how much time remaining I have at any point in time. So we've mounted our control unit to the foot of the bed here, and we've gone for the thermostat type. So there are a couple of different types of controls you can get for these diesel heaters, including like a dial, rotary dial that you can adjust the heat and fan speed. This one here though, you set a temperature, it will pick up the ambient temperature through this sensor here in the bottom left corner, and it will self-manage to make sure it maintains that correct temperature. Now you may notice that the display isn't quite functioning as it should. When you go to set the temperature there, it's missing a few of those little LED displays. Now, in all fairness, that's not the fault of the manufacturer. Unfortunately, due to the placement of this on the edge of the bed here, my kids do like to jump and play on this bed, and at some point they have damaged this display. So again, not a fault of the manufacturer. Maybe something you want to take into consideration if you do have kids. Yeah, they are going to play with these. You might want to try and cover them up somehow or protect them in some other way. So in order to turn the unit on, it is simple as pressing one of these two top buttons. So this top one here on the left, which is a picture of a fan, does exactly that. It only turns on the fan and won't start the combustion side of things. This one here, when you press that, the green light will turn on and the unit will start to activate. Now it's going to obviously go to its setting that's required to maintain the temperature that you set, and by setting the temperature, it's up and down arrows and just by holding them. So at the moment, we're at 19 degrees ambient temperature. If I want to go up, say 23, just hold it down, that's 24 at the moment, hold it down one way and it will set that temperature for us. So there we go, that's 23 degrees there. The unit will now self-manage and keep this van at 23 degrees. Okay, so that's how we went about installing the diesel heater on the inside of the van, choosing the placement, drilling those holes and installing the electrics. Let's jump onto the outside of the van and we'll go through about how I've done the rear tank that holds the 10 litres of diesel, how I've plumbed up all the lines, how it all works underneath and where the fuel pump is. Let's jump on underneath. Okay, so here we are back at the house. As appealing as it was, I wasn't really keen on rolling around the dirt to try and get underneath this van. So back in the driveway now, I've got the creeper down there so we can roll around underneath the van and I can show you how I've mounted up the tank, done all the plumbing, the fuel pumps and everything like that. So we'll start from the rear of the van where I've mounted the fuel tank and we'll work our way forward. Okay, so starting at the rear of the van here, I've mounted the fuel tank on the spare wheel mount that I've had made up on this van. So if you want to check out a little bit more about this bar, check out the off-road modification video that I've done on this Jayco Journey. I have increased the strength of the bar by putting in these gussets, and then I had a custom spare wheel bracket welded up and welded to the bar itself. I've then used an aluminium sheet which I've tech screwed into the back of that spare wheel bracket, and then the tank itself is mounted onto that. So I'll chuck a couple of photos up there, hopefully gives a better idea what's happening. And the good thing about this particular tank is that it is lockable as well. So do have a key on the Caravan keys, lock up the tank, means that no one's going to be messing around with your diesel or siphoning it out. Okay, so moving up underneath the van, you can see you have two bung ports, one up here on the side, which I'm not using, and the one down the bottom, just here, which is where the diesel line feeds from. So you can see I've covered the diesel line, in corrugated tubing, which then goes all the way around and mounts to the pump. So this here is the fuel pump that diesel heaters come with. Now the reason I've mounted it here is that you want it nice and close to the fuel tank itself, preferably within a metre. It just helps the efficiency of getting the fuel through that pump. Now it is a ball bearing pulse pump, so what that means is that inside this housing here is a small ball bearing that is pushed up and pushes the fuel through the lines. Now it needs to be seated, or the pump needs to be mounted on a 45-degree angle, like it is here, or close enough to anyway, to allow that ball bearing to reseat after every click. So far I've had no dramas with this. One thing you do have to note though is you will also have an electrical connection on the pump, which you'll have to get inside the van. So this electrical line here just wraps around to the back of the van and goes up through a factory hole in the back of the van, which goes underneath the bunk bed. So it's nice and easy, it plugs into the wiring loom. The fuel line, however, just follows majority of the rest of the plumbing all the way down to the diesel heater. Okay, so we're now underneath the main bed inside the van, and here you can see that diesel line that we just followed through from the rear of the van. So here is that metal bracket that I was explaining earlier. Again, I'll put another picture up again so you can see what it looks like, and then the diesel heater actually bolts with these 4 bolts to that metal bracket. So it's it's a fairly well secured system. Metal bracket screwed into the floor, these 4 bolts screwed to the metal bracket, and then I've gone ahead and used some silicone, which is why it's gone all orange here just in the dust, just to make sure there are no gaps on the connection between the gap between the wood and the bracket itself. So no dust and no airflow is going to get through.
Now here as well, we can see that there's 3 different pipes coming out of here. So the first one, like I said before, is the fuel line, and that's zip tied up against this black one here. Now this black one here is your air intake, so it's fairly short. It just comes up along here and then to this can here. Now this can here is one of 2 things. One, it's just a basic air filter, but it's also an air silencer as well. So it just helps in reducing the noise of the air being sucked in. And this here is the air that's sucked in for the combustion of the diesel engine itself, or little combustion chamber inside the heater. Now obviously this one here, as it would look like, is the exhaust. So that's the reason this is zip tied up against there, just to keep a little bit of a gap here between the exhaust and the fuel line. This pipe here does get pretty hot, and you do not want to be touching that when the diesel heater is on. Also from here, we can note that, see how close this is to the chassis rail. So the position of the heater inside the van, it may look like it's a bit random, a bit centralized in that big open area space, but I couldn't go any closer to the wall just because that chassis rail is right there. And also I didn't want to come too far away because of these hard water plumbing lines here. And then you've also got a gas line right here as well. So again, measure 1,000 times. It doesn't matter as long as you measure it correctly. If you need to, drill a small pilot hole, and that will give you an idea as to where the hole is coming out through the bottom of the van. And just cut once. That is a big hole to be cut in the bottom of your van. You do not want to be making a mistake. So with this exhaust here, this section here came with the kit, and then I've just purchased a muffler online, plus an extension of the exhaust, and that exhaust there comes out to the side of the van and points away from the van. So just finishing up there, you can see that the exhaust pipe comes out between these two, the chassis rail and the A-arm, and then just pops out here where it's just held on by a bracket there, pointing out towards the far side of the van.
Okay guys, it's about 5:15 in the morning. We're about 5 kilometers out of town, so it's nice and fresh this morning. What we're going to do now is we're going to turn the diesel heater on for the first time for the day, and we're going to measure how much power draw it pulls on from cold, having to warm up that glow plug, and how quickly and efficiently it heats up this 17-foot pop-top van. So let's jump on inside. I'll show you what we've got it set up, and we'll start the test. Okay, so this is how I'm going to measure the temperature of the van today, both inside and outside. So I've got this little basic weather station, one of those ones you can pick up from Bunnings, and you can see there in the bottom left-hand corner, it's showing the outdoor temperature at 4.2 degrees. Just above that, you can see the indoor temperature, which is 6.9 degrees. Now guys, I'm not sure exactly how accurate these are. It's all I've got to go off today, but it gives you an idea that it is pretty cold out here today. Behind that, we're just running an iPad with a stopwatch on it, so we'll be able to see there how quickly you can heat up this van in comparison to the outside temperature. Another consideration for heating is power, and obviously when you're camping off-grid, you need to make sure you have enough power to run the heaters that you want to be using. So in the case of a diesel heater, we measure it off this J control panel here. So this will tell us how many amps that the unit is drawing, and what we'll do now is we'll turn the diesel heater on for the first time today, so you'll be able to see exactly what it pulls. And as you can see here, if you haven't watched my other videos, you can check out my how-to Jayco Journey, and you'll be able to see exactly how this panel works. But here we have 2.1 amps being drawn at present, and that's these 4 LED roof lights that I need to have on today because it is still 5:30 in the morning and it's pitch black outside. Doing it this early not only means that we get a cold start, so the glow plug inside the heater is going to be fresh and cold, but also there is no solar input. It's still dark outside, and we're not going to get any of that solar input to the panel, and that's shown here by a null value there. So straight up, we can see that battery voltage jumped all the way up to 12 at one stage. Again, taking away the 2 amps drawn for the lights, so you're looking at about 10 amp draw initially. And what that's doing is it's warming up the glow plug inside the combustion chamber and preparing it for use. Again, once that glow plug is nice and warm and ready to go, it's going to shut off the electric input into that glow plug and obviously be maintained by the heat of the unit itself. Okay, so we just hit the 2-minute mark there, and we're still drawing 9.8 amps. So you take away a couple there and you're looking around the mid 7 amps. So we're still drawing quite a high voltage there, and you can see here, if you were to continue drawing that sort of voltage, we've only got about 5 hours of time remaining left, which is not much. But as you'll see in a couple of minutes, that glow plug will shut off and that will drop right down. So there we have it. We just hit 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and those amps have dropped right off down to 3.4. Again, taking away those couple of amps for the lights, we're looking at only just over 1 to 1.5 amps being drawn, and that's mainly just due to the fan from the unit itself. Obviously that fan has to stay on to be able to blow the air through. Okay guys, so just a quick update on how we're going in relation to heating up the van. We're looking at 3.3 degrees there outside. It's actually got a little bit colder since we started the test.
but we're looking at 18 degrees inside. Obviously we've been going there for 1 hour and 14 minutes, so it is taking its time, but I tell you what, it's a lot more comfortable in here. I'd much rather be waking up or getting out of bed in 18 degrees rather than 3 degrees, so it's working. Okay guys, so we're going to wrap up the test in relation to how quickly it heats up this 17-foot pop-top van. So we've got the iPad here, timing away, so it's at 1 hour and 46 minutes at the moment. So we're going to stop that, and then we're going to have a look at our weather station here that we've got. So again, like I showed at the start, it's got a couple of temperatures down at the bottom corner here. So the outdoor temperature is currently 4.9 and the indoor is 20 degrees. So hopefully that will focus for you there. So look, it has taken a little while, but it is very comfortable in here now. I'll tell you what, I'd much rather be waking up on a cold morning in 20 degrees rather than 4. So I've just spent the last 20 minutes or so getting ready for our next test outside. I've come inside and I can take my jacket off and I'm still very comfortable. So overall, great little unit there. So this unit has been incredibly helpful for us and our family. In 2018 we went to Central Australia. We did some camping out in the east and west at McDonald Ranges, and one morning in particular in Trafina Gorge it was minus 2.7 degrees and it was freezing. The water in the water pipes in the van actually froze solid and we had no access to water out of our taps, but in here it was nice and warm. So what we found is we don't often leave it running the entire night. We'll normally end up waking up sometime early in the mid-morning because it is so cold, and we can just quickly press the control at the foot of our bed at say anywhere between 2 and 4 in the morning, and a couple of hours later when we come to wake up it is 20 degrees like you've seen there. So awesome bit of gear, works really, really well, and that's it heating up in our 17-foot pop-top van. Now keep in mind as well guys, this is a pop-top van like I've mentioned a couple of times. So the whole top section of this van, as you can see behind me up here, is canvas, and there's a couple of decent sized vents along the side and they're regulated for gas. So this is not going to be nearly as well insulated as say a full height van without the pop-top function there. So if you have a full height van, you're going to have these nice big thick walls the whole way around, much less heat escaping through that canvas and through those vents. Probably going to be better in terms of how quickly you can heat your van up. Okay guys, so another common question is in relation to fuel usage. So with these diesel heaters you can get them in a couple of different sizes, and that will depend on how well it performs and how much fuel it uses. So most commonly in diesel heater market you're looking at a 2 kilowatt system or a 5 kilowatt system. So I on this van bought an Airtronic D2, which would suggest as being a 2 kilowatt system. Now for this 17-foot pop top, that is more than adequate enough. It does the job and maintains the temperature inside this van. To be honest, even if I was looking at something bigger, say a 19 or potentially even a 22 foot, you're still going to be getting a very good performance out of a 2 kilowatt system. However, you might want to start looking at those bigger units. In terms of fuel usage, a general rule of thumb is that the system will use 100 millilitres or 0.1 of a litre for every hour per kilowatt of that system when it is run on high. So in our example here, we're running a 2 kilowatt system. We're going to be expecting about 200 mil or 0.2 of a litre burned every hour while the system is running on its highest setting. Now keep in mind, it's not going to be running at its highest setting for more than a few hours to get the van up to temperature, and then it's going to start tapering down and obviously use less fuel. And that runs fairly well in line with the Airtronic D2 manufacturer, which does say that it uses about 230 mil per hour on that high setting. So obviously if you're going to be looking at a 5 kilowatt system, you are going to be looking maybe towards the 0.5 of a litre or 500 millilitres per hour when running on the high. But keep in mind, if you're going to be running them, you're not going to have to run them for nearly as long in the same space because they will heat the area up a little bit quicker. Another consideration you have to take into account for diesel heaters is maintenance. Now maintenance on these is very easy. There are people out there that say you have to service them once a year, but that is not really the case, not in my experience anyway. I've had my diesel heater in now for 2.5 years, and I've used it through 2 winters, and so far it's performed flawlessly without any sort of disassembly and maintenance. And the manufacturers do suggest that you do run these units from time to time just to make sure they're operating correctly and blow out any of, I don't know, say cobwebs or any of the gunk built up inside the combustion chamber. So rule of thumb is that if you can run it for 1 hour once a month, just to sort of get that system flushed out, make sure it's nice and fresh, that's going to help in the long-term maintenance side of things.
Another thing that I do as well is the start of every season, start of every winter, I will drop the 10-litre tank and try and get as much fuel out of those fuel lines and just put some fresh diesel in as well. So diesel does go off, it has a bit of expiry. It's been sitting there for over a year. It's just going to be dirty stuff going through, and I'd much rather have nice clean diesel go through the system. It's going to perform well and keep it nice and clean inside that combustion chamber. If for whatever reason your unit does start to falter, start to misfire, or maybe not as quite as effective as it was before, you can take these in to get them serviced, or even service them yourself. It's quite easy to disassemble the unit, take it apart, clean it up, and put it back together. So another thing we'll discuss as well is the safety of these units. So when I refer to that, I mean, what sort of safety systems does the unit itself have in place, and how safe are they to use, say, around young kids and babies? So first of all, safety switches. So it does have a the safety switch inside inbuilt into the unit. So either under voltage or over voltage, again, depending on the manufacturer and the model, it will shut off and protect your electrical systems. It also has an overheating temperature sensor as well. So inside the unit, there is a temperature sensor. If it does detect that that unit for whatever reason is getting too hot, it will shut down. And obviously that's going to eliminate burning of the unit, damage to the unit, and even a fire risk as well. Third one is a fuel lockout system. So if for whatever reason the unit tries to start up, can't get fuel, can't source fuel, it'll try 3 times in total before turning the system off, shutting down, and going through its reset function as well. So this is a good thing to keep in mind as well when you first are installing your diesel heater. Obviously when you're putting fuel into the lines, the pump is going to need to pump the diesel through those all the way through the lines onto the heater. In my experience, it took 5 goes for the heater to pick up the first bit of fuel and start that combustion, and it did take a couple of resets to get to that point. The last sensor it has as well is a fuel pump shut-off sensor as well. So if for whatever reason anything goes wrong with the unit, detects something's incorrect, the fuel pump itself will shut down and prevent more fuel being put into the combustion chamber, and therefore avoiding and eliminating the risk of that combustion chamber flooding, and therefore causing damage or just making it more of a pain to get restarted again. Now, one of the big considerations for us when getting a heater was our kids. So that's the main reason we got a diesel heater in the first place, is our kids, especially when we first started camping with our 6-month-old, was a little bit too young. When they rolled out of their covers on their bed at night, they were too young to put themselves back in again. Having a diesel heater meant that the van was at least fairly warm, and it was nice and safe for them to be sleeping. They're not going to get sick or not sleep very well throughout the night. Saying that, having a diesel heater running, we want to go and make sure that it's safe for them. They're not going to get burnt or come across any hazards with the unit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the system itself, where it's all installed, and how safe it actually is exposed to young kids, especially at the low height that it's installed at. So we'll switch cameras, we'll get out a temperature gun, and we'll go through it and I'll show you how hot the unit actually gets. So here we have the unit itself. And again, obviously this section underneath the bed here is not exposed to, say, a young child, but it is there if you were to leave it open. How hot does it actually get? We've got here is a little temperature reading gun, and this will detect how hot these bits get here. So in comparison here, if we have a look at, say, a cabinet here, we're looking at about 15.2 degrees. When we look at the outlet vent here, looking at, say, about 60 degrees there. However, if you go to touch that, you can still leave your hands on it. It's not that hot. It is definitely warm, but it's still able to leave your hands firmly placed on it. You're just going to get a bit of a tingle there. In terms of the air coming out of the vent there, you're looking at about 70 degrees. So that's just inside that plumbing there. So obviously there, it's looking pretty warm. In terms of this outlet pipe here, you are looking at about, again, mid 60 degrees there, 70 there. So high 60s to 70 degrees on that outlet pipe. Now again, you can touch this pipe. It's not overly hot. You can keep your hands on it. It's not going to burn you, but it is warm. The unit itself, if we look at the hot side of the unit, we're looking at about 46 degrees there. And then the cold side of the unit, we're looking at about 17 degrees, which we would expect. That's obviously where that cold air is coming into the unit. So in terms of safety, it is relatively safe for young kids. Obviously, if they do stand in front of it here, you are going to get some heat coming out of that vent, but it's not a burning sensation. They will obviously feel it before they get burnt, and hopefully just move away.
So if you're interested, guys, these little heat guns are a really good little tool to add to your kit for your car. Not only are they good for doing things that I've just done there, measuring temperatures inside your van, but another really handy little tip they are, especially when camping or caravanning with kids, is checking out fire pits as well. So if you're worried that someone may have left a fire or buried a fire with sand, chuck one of these on it. You can sort of get an idea as to how hot they are before you let your kids run around camp. Relatively inexpensive, I think they're about $30, and I bought this one online. It does the job quite well, and I'll stick a link in the description below if you're interested in picking one up for yourself. Okay guys, so we're now back outside, all rugged up again. It is still 5 degrees out here, so it is still cold. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a test in relation to how noisy these diesel heaters actually are, and compare them with a few other things today. So what I've done is I've measured 5 meters from the exhaust of the van on the far side, which is the driver's side of the car, and we measured 5 meters to where the iPhone's set up here. Now look, I don't have any professional sort of noise measuring devices, so we're going to use the iPhone and a decibel reader app as well. Now I'm going to try and keep the test as consistent as possible, so even if the camera doesn't quite pick up how noisy it is, you'll be able to compare it with other devices or engines or whatever you have to sort of gauge and get an idea about how noisy they are. So first of all, we're going to take a measurement of nothing, this ambient noise that we're currently in at the moment. Then we're going to do one with the Honda EU22 generator, and then we're going to do one with the gas hot water system running. We're going to turn the car around, we're going to use it with the idle of the V8 Cruiser that we've got here, and then we're finally going to do one with the diesel heater running, and you should be able to gauge an idea of sort of how noisy they are in compared to the other tests that we're doing today. So we'll go through and get it all set up, and we'll get this test done. Okay guys, so like I said, this is the far side of our van here. The exhaust pipe for our diesel heater just comes out underneath in that stabilizer leg there. We've got the generator set up ready to go. I have measured a 5 meter distance from there to where the iPhone is currently set up. So we'll set it up, we'll get the base measurement of the ambient noise that we're currently in at the moment. So there we go guys, an ambient noise base setting, average of 51.5 decibels. Let's get the Jenny started up, do it again. Okay guys, so one thing I'm going to make clear quickly is that the generator is currently on, but it is on its eco mode. So this is just idling with no load on it. We're going to do 2 tests here. We're going to do one with it ecoing like it is at the moment, and then I'm going to put it onto under load as well, just put it up to its full revs to get an idea of both. It is a bit noisier. So with no load, Honda EU22 generator, let's do our minute now. Okay, no load, Honda EU22, average 63 decibels for that 60 seconds. Let's turn that generator up, do it again. Okay, Honda generator's been turned up to its operating idle there, so let's reset. There we go, 1 minute of the Honda generator under load, average of 67.1 decibels. Let's flick the Cruiser around, we'll get that one done. So the Cruiser's flicked around, it's in line with the Honda generator now. It is just a standard VDJ 200 series engine. There's no performance air filters, no performance chips, and no performance exhaust. It is stock standard 200 series engine. Let's clear the results, see how much noise it makes in a minute. There you go, so the Cruiser idling there next to the generator is 60.9 decibels. Let's get the hot water system going. So the factory gas hot water system is now activated. Let's see how much noise that makes. Okay, so the factory gas hot water system there, 1 minute, 53.1 decibels on average. Last one now, diesel heater. Okay, so that diesel heater is running on high at the moment. We'll reset the decibel reader here. 1 minute and off we go.
Okay, so there we go, 1 minute. Average there for the diesel heater on high is 60.9 decibels. So in order to keep that test consistent and fair, I didn't want to move any of the gear as I was moving it around to try and get it set up for the noise test. So I'll quickly go through now and show you exactly how it was set up and where everything was placed in relation to those tests. So the main camera was set up here, pointing down onto the decibel reader, which you can see on your screen, just at that mark on the ground, which is 5 meters from where all of the items were placed. So obviously we have the cruiser there, that was idling in that test. We have the generator here. The hot water system is this black cap just here, which was obviously going off at one stage, and then the exhaust for the diesel heater is just up under there, and the unit is just behind this chassis rail here. So as you can see, everything was kept as close as possible to that focus area, being 5 meters away from the testing area. Okay, so we're going to do the same sort of test we did outside using the same decibel reader here. So I'll zoom in on this. We're going to do the first one, ambient noise, nothing on, and then we'll do one with the diesel heater on. First test, ambient. Okay, so 1 minute ambient noise, 47.7 decibels. Let's get that diesel heater cranked on. Test 2, this is with the diesel heater on high inside the van. There we have it, 53.1 for an average of 60 seconds with that diesel heater on. So there you have it, guys. That's a bit of a comparison both inside and outside in relation to how noisy the unit is. Now, it might be a bit hard to pick up on camera and it might be a bit hard to try and get the feel for that, but overall, look, it's not that noisy. It's not that offensive. It's a great little unit, and look, I'm going to be using it anyway, free camping. At least it keeps me and my family warm. Okay guys, so that concludes today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it informative in relation to what you need to think about if you are considering a diesel heater. So make sure you do all your research, make sure you find out if diesel heaters are right for you. But I hope today's information gave you some things to consider. Maybe think about if you are considering getting a diesel heater. Look, they are great units, they are efficient, they are effective, keeps me and my family warm anyway. And what it does do is it allows you to go away in your caravan, your RV, your motorhome, your camper trailer, whatever it is, it allows you to get out there more often in maybe some not ideal weather conditions. It gives you that opportunity to get out in the bush when it is cold, and that means that you and your family are going to have a much more enjoyable experience. So this is my experience with this particular heater. Hopefully you guys found all the information useful. If you have any questions, make sure to flick us a message, leave a comment below. If you like the video, make sure you like the video and subscribe to our channel for more information like this. Otherwise guys, appreciate you watching and we'll see you next time. Thank you.